I want this particular waifu. Okay, you've now been transported to that particular waifu in the Belverse. Good luck.
Yeah, have fun. Try not to get shot.
Yeah, it depends on the bell sometimes. Frozen Scarecrow, yes, of course it is all right. And Urza, yeah, if you want to just toss them in chat as well. We've got a slate of questions from friends Wellington, Dragoon, Sarcastic Cat. But we'll blaze through those, and then of course, time permits, we will be happy to get to y'all's.
Yeah. If not, I can always copy and paste these into a Word doc and just send them off to various people later as well.
Well, and as it transpires, like some of these questions do have very similar answers. So, yeah. So we are flexible.
Oh yeah, and don't worry about sounding creepy. That question's actually already been asked, so it will be answered. I can't say if the answer will be good. I don't know, but
yeah, that's the it's the subject of some discussion.
No, maybe leave it up to a vote. Whoever donates the most money gets to decide.
I don't know if that's legal.
Probably not. I don't know. Maybe. I'm not a legal expert these days.
Well, I think it would change the rating of the game, wouldn't it?
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's a Kickstarter tier that would have a few more zeros added to it.
Fund the game by yourself, and then yeah, the answer can be yes.
Yeah, it's a commission at that point.
Pretty much. It'd probably be cheaper just to ask whoever you hired as an author, and I'm going to have my own story.
Hey, I may or may not know some guys.
Alright, we're gonna wait for Diff to get here, and then we'll probably start.
Gotcha.
Well,
speak of the devil.
Hey, testing my setup. Looks like...
Yeah, sound good.
All right,
let me ping everyone in known existence. If you were ready to start, Diff.
You know what, Wigbird? You could do that. That'd be super helpful from a marketing perspective. That sounds great.
Oh, that would be great if I could just simultaneously tell everyone that existed, hey, my QnA's starting. You should show up. I wish I could do that. I'd use it for a lot better things, though. Personally. Everyone, you should send me money.
Well, I was actually thinking more about like world peace, but okay, that works too.
I'd prefer to have money at this point in life.
Well, these things take time.
I can get world peace with money.
Yeah.
Probably.
You could just buy Twitter, maybe.
I don't know if I'd buy Twitter and get rid of it. I don't like Twitter.
God bless.
I don't understand it.
What a killjoy, Wigbird. What a killjoy.
I just don't understand it. I've got that boomer mindset.
Something unmitigated disaster for mankind.
Yeah, something like that. Aliens, of course aliens are real. Why wouldn't they be?
Well, I mean, okay, you discover if aliens are real. What do you do with that information? That's the question.
You panic immediately.
No, you sell it to the highest bidder to make even more money.
Now, this is a great lore Q&A already.
Of course.
See, what do we have that they want, right? If they can get to our planet, I assume they have, a whole other planet's worth of resources.
True. Maybe they ran out.
Yeah.
That classic one.
It's like the last gas station before wherever.
Yeah. I really hope Earth's not the last gas station. I don't want to live in that part of the galaxy.
Well, if it's one of those gas stations that has those, like, nerds gummies, I'm okay with that.
Maybe.
All right, it's 3 Eastern. Let's get going.
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually start with this. And this time I've actually prepared our 2 dev members with the questions that were sent in to me, so it's slowly getting less scuffed.
Right.
Slowly.
Okay. I guess we should just get right into it, shouldn't we? Yeah. So this first slate of questions here from Mr. Lord Wellington. Any particular reason why the Morganas have certain national voices? So the in-universe explanation that we like is they default to the accent of the first human that they captured. So that's sort of their first brush with our language, with our form of expression. So that's what they stick with. As far as the INPF knows, as far as anybody knows.
Yeah, this is as good as time as any to preface this with some of the questions that you guys are asking. We have to be super, super careful about the answers. So we're going to give you an in-universe explanation, which is an unreliable narrator explanation. So bear that in mind, because there may be a totally separate reason.
But yeah, you know what. I mean, effectively, y'all are the captains. Y'all are the INPF. So you know what they know.
Yeah, it's
Because you
aliens.
know what you know. So are the Morganas tied to their hulls the same way bells are? As war goes on, bells can go further out. Will Morganas wax or wane? I would say yes. I would say, and this sort of ties in with the later question from Dragoon, are Morganas the same as bells? They have similar limitations, they're tied to their vessels in similar ways. But I think the Morganas are a little more, they're a little more creative at the start. That's how I would put it. Some of the other people on the team would put it, they're more insane and less kind of tethered to reality and to their physical forms. But as they evolve, the bells may evolve as well, because they're fundamentally fairly similar beings. Let me toss the document here in the chat in answer to the question here.
Yep, see, there's that scuffedness that we needed. Okay, now we're back on brand.
There we go. All right, so now we can follow along here. All right. So, national voices. Are the Morganas tied to their hulls the same way bells are? Yes, and that may change in the future. Morganas speak in a universal language that everybody can understand at once, or they only speak one language. So, I'd say, in the same way that you can assume that bells can communicate with the captain and crew, right? Morganas have sort of a translator thing going on because they have to be able to demoralize humans, right? They have to be able to communicate with us, even if only to tell us that we're all going to die. And it's certainly unnerving, but it's certainly unnerving if they can only speak in static and other horrific sounds and whatnot. But there has to be a sort of personal touch to it that comes with having our languages. Again, that earlier question of how do they speak, right? What they know, they've captured from us. How will BCS address if at all, the war as the game progresses? That's a metagame consideration. Will the Germans gain ports in France? Will fighting overall ease off? Again, that depends on how the French players conduct the war, how the German players conduct the war. A lot of things have happened and will happen similarly to our world, the SS Athenia and whatnot, but there is the potential for things to change. So a lot of it's still up in the air,
And,
up to 19th.
One thing to add to that too is that, especially if we're talking 1940, there would have to be some pretty dramatic player-based choices to affect something that close in time. But certainly, the further you go along, the more you'd see it deviate, fractally from real history.
Mm-hmm. I'll actually take this moment as well to address Dragoon's second question. What do the factions Axis Allies Comintern have to do in regards to the game's lore? Same basic principle. If you're part of the Axis Allies Comintern, your actions, based on the data that we're reading from what you do, can affect the prosecution of the war. If you're not aligned, you can commit to one or another faction, and that'll be taken into account. And this affects all manner of things. There's a do we have a general idea of how things might go one way or another? We've talked about it, but y'all have the potential to surprise us, certainly.
Italians joining the Allies is going to happen. I'm making it happen, one way or the other.
Hey, sky's the limit. Let's see. From Dragoon, generalized story synopsis for new players. People wanted to learn about the game. Okay, we just lost Sarcasticat, actually. I hope he comes back. But for those who are listening in, for those who are listening back to it later, in Victory Bells, Hitler invades Poland in 1939, as in our world. Minutes later, mysterious ghost ships invade our world and attack the humans all over the world's oceans. And the only thing that saves us is the appearance of the Bells, our own guardian ship spirits that fight back against the Morganas and are their natural enemy. And what transpires is an uneasy peace on the world's oceans. All the belligerent navies set aside their differences to fight the greater existential threat. But again, uneasy peace, because if and when the Morganas are defeated, what war will the Bells ultimately fight? But for now, we've got waifus, so we have to deal with that. And following on from that, welcome back, Sarcasticat. How do Bells come into being? So far, generally under duress. They've appeared in times of great need. They've appeared to parry Morgana attacks on the human ports just in time. There are a couple exceptions. Exeter herself says she just appeared one day, and there wasn't any sort of inciting war battle incident. If you look back through the updates, Constellation flickers in and out now and again for reasons only she knows. And in general, it's a subject of intense study by the INPF. What I like to call the where is it? Yeah, what I like to call the Bell Operations and Activities Task Force is a constituent body within the INPF that monitors these things. And their working assumption right now is, I know it when I see it. They come in when they're most needed, but they're open to revising their hypothesis because it may be forcibly revised in the near future. Are the Morganas the same as Bells? Yeah, we discussed that. Guardian spirits tied to a similar ship, though again, not necessarily wedded to a single manifestation or configuration. They're more quote-unquote creative in how they appear and how they change themselves and how they mutate. And in terrifying ways. Let's see. And to Mr. Dragoon's question, when a Bell sinks and is needed for rescue, what happens to them? I'm afraid I'm not certain what you mean by that question. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I think, let's say you have to re-recruit, perhaps. At least that's how I understood it. I could be wrong, though.
Okay. So do you mean like the in-universe explanation for that? Like if you lose Mori or whoever and you collect her Vesters, what's happened in terms of story?
He says yes.
Okay, cool. Well, and again, questions tying into each other. That sort of brings us to the how do Vesters work question. In general, what a Vesture is to a Bell is a sort of psychic anchor for her, and the more of them you gather in one place, the stronger the sort of call to her across the gulf of time and space. Gather enough, and she can re-enter our world. And of course, the bigger, more powerful the ship, the generally the more Vesters that you need. You see that dynamic in the hull types.
And to Encinda's, awesome statement there, the physical ship is indeed wherever it landed on the seafloor. But as a part of that call, it will re-raise and partially repair, reassemble.
Me trying to summon a Bell using Ancient Sword, but I accidentally summoned Artoria Pendragon. Yeah, I'll leave y'all to decide which servant classes the various Bells are. What's the Morgana's end goal? The League of Nations story is your friend. It's alluded to, speculated about. What it actually... Oh, no, I mean, certainly not. Well, but maybe it could be. Maybe they just have a very different way of, uplifting our world and bringing world peace. Blue and orange morality, as the tropers say. Are there Bell leaders for/from each nation? That depends on the Bell you ask. I'm sure Hood would consider herself the leader type for the UK Bells. Constitution, I think, tends to be treated as the default within the American sphere of things, just because of her special status. But there's not really a first among equals dynamic that I can think of. Pol is the Italian leader. No one wants to upset her. I mean, where's the lie?
True.
How we get into Sarcasticat. How exactly does the metaverse work? You're referring to the metagame, right, friend Sarcasticat? Like how the players interact with the world's lore?
Well, I think just, the second part of that question is just every player technically in the same universe? Are we all in the same story, or, are we each that's a protagonist, essentially?
That's a fun question. I think the shape of the war, the shape of the metagame is determined by all players, but are you guys all in the same universe? I mean, I don't think the story is told that way. I think the story is told like it's you. But later on, when inevitably, we do like something with fleet exercises where you can battle PvP, you'd almost have to kind of be in the same universe. Of course, then you multiple copies of every Bell and so on and so forth. So I think for universe consistency's sake, probably you're just the captain. For gameplay mechanics and fun's sake, you can interact with other players.
Mm-hmm. Not unlike Dark Souls in that way. Everybody's got their world. Everybody's the hero of their own world. But ultimately, it's the same single story, right? Yes, I have been playing Elden Ring. How can you tell? What happens when a player signs onto the game in the in-game year of 1946? So questions 2 and 3 are basically this pretty similar questions, right? Right, Diff? Eventually there will be an end to this, but people are still going to want to see how the story plays out, right? So it wouldn't just be a matter of okay, go home, we're done, right?
Yeah, well, this one has an extra wrinkle in it too, because the aspect of player choice can't easily be replicated in a single player experience. That is to say, the levers, some of the levers in the metagame that we're going to give to you guys are so dramatic that if you were to build them all at once, that would be a massive effort. At various times, we have kind of kicked around the idea of when it wraps, that we do kind of drop like a gold version. But it would only be the choices that you guys made, because that's the content, right?
So what you're saying is we need to invent a way to travel the multiverse to see all of it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, if you can build a time machine, that would be great for so many different reasons.
Oh yeah.
I'll get to work on that.
Let's see, just so I don't have to scroll back too far, I'm gonna jump ahead and take Calc's question here. Do Morganas of the same type, example given, destroyers, battleships, see each other as sisters like Bells of the same class do? In general, I mean, the whole type may be similar, but the Morganas are so drastically different from each other and evolve in such a different manner that, if they are sisters, it's very much in an adoptive capacity. And of course, they're not above infighting at all.
Yeah, there's no love lost between multiple copies of Fire, for instance.
Mm-hmm. And, oh boy, well, I mean, we'll get into that. What changes for a Bell who transfers to a different navy under the same name? So I was discussing this with another editor earlier, actually. We have a pretty close example to the phenomena that Sarcastic Cat is positing here, and that's Perth, right? Because she was commissioned as Amphion and then recommissioned as Perth when she was given to the Australian Navy the June before the war begins, right? But, she doesn't gain an Australian accent, right? She doesn't become, fundamentally Australian. She still has that Greek sort of aspect about her, The way I like to think about it is that, I'm American by extraction. If I move to France and gain French citizenship, my background remains the same. I don't become fundamentally French. Is there a process of, getting to know the sort of place that I've transferred to and gain citizenship in? Yeah. Can Bells gain some sort of awareness of their new setting and their new navy? I would say yeah. Fundamentally, though, I think it depends on, it depends on the nature of the transfer, Do they do it voluntarily? Are they sunk and refloated and recommissioned? Do they have to, following on from that, do they have to die first and then come back? Still a very, very open question. Physically and mentally for a Bell the moment their name is changed, what is that like? Yeah, again, if it's traumatic or not, that factors into it. To a Bell which has just changed name and or nation, how do they view their past self? Again, depends. Parishkaya Kamuna awoke after her big rename. She looks on her past with shame.
Hold on just a moment, Jank. Do we have anybody who is a native Russian speaker on the call right now? Because please lock up your ears in that pronunciation. Okay. Continue, Jank.
I'm from Texas. It's our curse. What is the power? What more can you tell us about how Vester's alone influence whether a Bell spawns or not? Psychic Anchor, we addressed that. What is the power of a historiographic vesture?
One quick thing about that, just to add to the Vesters alone. So, Kat, it's actually that the Vester comes after the Bell awakens. Those objects are obviously around, but they don't attain significance until the Bell has manifested. So that the Vester alone couldn't influence the Bell. Sorry, go ahead, Jenk.
So is that what we mean by the historiographic vesture then? Like a pre-existing vesture, like say, a copy of Foundations of Leninism for Aurora, right? Does that suddenly gain like magical powers? I would say, it depends on the bell. Not every copy of a given book is going to be is going to have that kind of power, right? What?
I don't think we can answer number 10, can we? Like, we have to.
Well, who wrote that one fanfic about sort of the collective faith and memory of New Yorkers bringing back recruits? Because I quite like that explanation.
We'll just have to leave that a mystery.
Yeah, certainly. The Bell Operations and Activities Task Force is it's hotly debated by them to this day. It could be the Vestra thing. It could be something a little bit different.
Who knows?
Where is Carl Galster? This is no longer a request. Gun emoji. Assumed lost.
I believe that she's just laying minefields right now.
Maybe one day.
Wherever she happens to be. Admiral Cher also has a bell, conceivably. With her ace captain, we could expect to see that. Could you maybe Diff, a little bit more about the ace captains? There a specific sort of historical personage that I'm missing?
Yeah. So the answer to the question is that the historical captains, for better or for worse, despite their awesome exploits, they're either shipped ashore or they're sent to a different ship or what have you. Because when the bell manifests, it's the captain of the bells, aka you, that runs the show. Yeah, we toyed with the idea of having certain, very interesting historical personages maintain their presence on the ship and be some sort of local commander, and you're more like a commodore and so on and so forth. But ultimately, we decided to pull them. Could that change? Yeah, it could. We try to keep historical personages to the stories by and large, but you never know.
Let's see. And yeah, Admiral Cher, yeah, conceivably. We've mentioned...
Sorry, go ahead.
Question 13. The Eritrean
that is
bell.
About Sparrow's story, technically. Or the contents of Sparrow's story. Yeah. Just for those who are confused and don't know what that's referring to.
I think everything you know about those events, that's in the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sparrow's story is your friend. How physical are bells? Oh, here we go. I mean, they can bleed, they can cough, they can sneeze, all sorts of things. They're, human enough that it's not out of the ordinary for doctors to check up on them, but I mean, they heal super quickly. They don't get, get knocked off their feet by illness in the same way that we do. They're more medical curiosities than patients, I would describe them as. Of course, we discussed this a little bit earlier. I don't remember precisely when, but it's happened in certain stories that you'll see bells sustain wounds to their human forms that are contiguous or coterminous, whatever the word is, with damage to their ship, right? So they take damage in a certain part of their hull, and then they get like a bruise on their arm or whatever. That wouldn't work in reverse, right? You're not gonna have a bell break her leg and then lose a turbine. That would be a pretty significant weakness. Incidentally, a bell can break her leg, but it takes a lot of effort. They are built different. For question 15, is there a science to the bell's physical body is rather than purely magic? Of course, they've got flesh and blood plus. That's all we know.
And to add to that too, there are some obvious supernatural characteristics. For example, if they so choose, they can disappear, reappear. It's definitely a loose flirtation with the corporeal.
Mm-hmm. Walking through walls and all that. And some of them indulge in that more than others. Okay, question 16. So Rumiko Takahashi, the mangaka behind Ranma 1/2, was asked a similar question, and her response was, "I don't think about that, and neither should you." And this is not to say we haven't thought about such things, but the working assumption of the Bell Operation and Activities Task Force is that this is not possible. Potential for male bells. Where are the husbandos? I don't see why not. Anything can happen.
We'll be sure to make Bismarck fail.
The one, because that ship specifically was called He, was it not?
Yeah, well, I mean, if we want to be technical, like many of these, many of the navies in question think of their ships as men. That's more of like a, I don't know, it seems to be an Anglo-Saxon thing.
Yeah.
But nonetheless.
Well, yeah, and there's of course quite often a disconnect between what a navy thinks of its ship and the bell that they necessarily get. Case in point, Atlantis. Has the team made any serious progress regarding sunken ship bells? We discussed this, haven't we, Diff?
Yeah, I mean, I think we sort of want to leave this, as a sort of a, you'll find out.
Yeah.
I think you guys have already seen several instances where maybe a surprising choice was made for a bell. So, I mean, Recruit herself kind of tells you that there's lots of opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, honestly, this answer can be applied to question 20 as well, right? Paper bells. So much of this, or at least, some of this, can fall to metagame considerations. History can play out a certain way, it can play out, not a certain way. Not exactly lore related, but it would be cool to see some new visuals, updated character models, especially for the ones suffering from... Well, oh, you know what? Actually, this is the perfect time to, let's see. Let me scroll through here. We've just got... I have been authorized to share this.
Oh, boy.
By the Yamster. On the subject of new visuals and updated character models for certain bells, you may recognize this friend here.
Wow, very interesting.
So, rest assured, we are always having these conversations, and we don't want to leave any bells in the dust, as it were. Right. Other questions. We built up quite a log of them.
I have copied the other big chunk that Frozen posted.
And Jake, before we leave question 19, so the main characters are sort of going to be what you guys play and how you position the bells in the metagame. I don't think we're going to leave anybody behind. Maybe some folks won't be touched, for quite some time, but it's definitely certain that as you guys establish your favorite bells, you'll see them pop up for obvious reasons.
Yeah, analytics are analytics. But there's no bell that I I mean, of course I play favorites, but I also want to see every bell have her place in the sun. Let's see. Wigbert's got a slate of questions here. I think we can get through the ones in the QnA chat channel fairly quickly.
I think there was one last one from that set 20. What can you tell about the team's ideas for paper bells? But actually, I think that's just sort of the same answer, right? We can't really talk about the paper bells or the sunk bells or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's something that has yet to be determined. You know, the machinery for that is coming. When did Schleswig-Holstein awaken canonically? Sometime during the Nazis' attack on the Westerplatte. She wasn't the first bell to awaken, per se, but she was among the first, certainly. Scroll. Mr. Urza, some world building questions. Now that we have mid-1942 levels of Atlantic commerce rating going on everywhere simultaneously, how much is the private sector melting down right now? So, yeah, there's a lot of world building and a lot of economic trouble and rejiggering that has to take place, right? Certainly the Morganas tipped their hand, I think, very hard in the initial attack, and having been repelled, they're sort of, they're still certainly a global threat, but they're not, but they're certainly not coordinated in the sense that they were on the very first day, you know? So I would say that there's a, there's a constant threat that keeps all of humanity's shipping and forces, whatnot, tied up. Is it having some serious knock-on effects on certain populations that depend on, one resource or another? Absolutely. Is it bringing humanity to its knees? Not right away, but, there is still an open question of how long we can remain on this war footing. So that's a very good question to ask, and it's something that's on our mind as, these stories get written. Will we see Bell storylines that involve Bell shamelessly promoting IMPF operations in certain parts of the world with the aim of securing supplies of critical war-making material like chocolate, coffee, alcohol? Some Bells are certainly more of, I'm thinking right now of Captain America in the film, doing his propaganda and whatnot. Some Bells are certainly more open to that than others. Nation selection, choice, and alignment actually matters, kind of. Yes, it does. Release a book with all your ideas that never made it. Preliminary drawings. That'd certainly be cool.
There's a couple of questions here from Frozen, and then I see one from Urza as well.
Yeah.
I guess we'll grab Urza just so that we don't lose it. Oh, no, you did do that one, didn't you? Yeah, that's the economy one. Oh, duh.
Yeah, the economy one. Frozen.
Yeah, if you check, I think Wigbert sent it to us. So
yeah,
Wigbert
gave it too in case they got lost.
Yeah, Wigbert sent me a slate here.
Yeah, does every instance of a Morgana know the same thing? In Salt Lake City story, Malice claimed to be the best boxer. Does every Malice believe that she is the best?
Well, that depends on what you consider to be Malice, right? What is Malice really? No, but as far as I'm concerned, every Malice considers herself the same being, right? And of course every Vanity, I would think, considers herself the ideal Vanity, right? I think that really has a lot to do with the personality of the Morgana in question.
But I think the question here that Frozen is asking is knowledge shared? If
to the degree
Malice is across the world, battling somebody, and then Malice B is in, the other side of the world, do they know the same information?
They're learning.
Okay.
They're learning, and yeah, you can infer what you like from that, but that's what we're given to understand so far is that they're learning, so they're, we can fight them here, we can fight them there, and wherever we banish them back to when we sink them, they're comparing notes among themselves. What kind of threat can an old bell like Constitution hold that even a strong word from her is enough to dissuade attack? What kind indeed? again, that depends on. There's a lot of it depends around here, but in a lot of ways, the older a belle is, the more powerful she is. You see this a little bit with Aurora. Constitution has so much history and so much lore behind her that she's operating on a different level than she's operating on above and beyond anything current Bells or Morganas, I think, are capable of. Of course, within the rational limits of her wooden ship status. But again, ship girl magic can punch well above its weight. Look no further than Recruit. Look no further than Amerigo Vespucci. Let's see. With the Morgana threat, a lot of nations are probably going to build new ships. Is a Belle at a disadvantage if she has a name never used before? I mean, not to the degree that. I mean, I'm thinking right now of the U-boats, U-37, U-29 and all that, or I-8. Like, just because a name doesn't necessarily have history behind it doesn't mean there's not other aspects of culture and origin and whatnot to draw on, right? So, a name alone can't doom a Belle. A name alone can't make her, have an unfair advantage. So I don't think that's something that she necessarily has to worry about. Does a Belle have to come from a warship or something similar? Could some guy's fishing boat manifest a Belle if deemed necessary? That would speak to a very strong-willed fisherman. And I don't know of that. I don't know of any scenario in which that's occurred or might be possible. Is it something the Bell Operation and Activities Task Force is paying attention to? Yes. But, we haven't seen it. Now, I will say, especially if you're an aircraft carrier Bell, those girls are tuned into this sort of broader reality of, their planes and other machinery having some sort of consciousness that humans can't necessarily understand or interact with, but that Bells can. So Bells can serve as a sort of intermediary that way. Again, whether that means a fishing boat can awake or is, has some kind of consciousness. If they do, it's not anything that humans know how to really make use of. If Bells choose their captain, why do some seem so hostile to actually, captaining? I mean, that's the thing, what makes you the hero of the story? Why you? Why not anybody else? They don't have to like or necessarily agree with who they pick to be the captain, but they have to see something in you that they don't see in anybody else, and that changes from bell to bell. So yeah, they don't have to agree with you, but they're going to work with you regardless. Bayern's story basically confirms two things. Gremlins are apparently real. Something Bell-related is in the plains yet. We discussed that. Will you learn more about plain spirits and other superstitions apparently being true? There's a lot of magical, sparkly ship girl stuff that goes on, and a lot of magical, sparkly non-ship girl stuff. Again, the degree to which the player can get any kind of experience or influence over it is probably not terribly appreciable. But never say never. No way to ask this without sounding creepy, but Captain plus Belly, again, we don't know. And the working assumption is that no. Does Arizona drink? In her chaos interview, she says Arizona's dry, and so am I. When I offer her a drink. In the old dames club, she's drinking Sauvignon Blanc. Is it only on special occasions? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd say.
I think I could grab this one because I think this is actually a little bit of dissonance that we didn't pick up on when we were putting it through, because Arizona is a dry ship, but I think we just I mean, Jenk, I don't know who wrote that one, but I think we just forgot.
Yeah,
Like,
I can.
like,
I
like
have
straight
the
up.
I have the document somewhere around, but uh,
Yeah. Arizona at the time of her commission, and then thereafter was definitely a dry ship, and she's remained so.
hmm.
But I don't know. Maybe that was non-alcoholic Sauvignon Blanc. How about that?
Yeah, Virgin Sauvignon Blanc. There you go.
Right, exactly.
Denatured. Let's see. That's the frozen questions. Let's see who else we got here. Arizona's my favorite girl, so that's literally the only reason I remember that weird bit. I do like Arizona a lot. What about land-based air power, coastal batteries, regular artillery? What would happen to a Bell carrier's air group if it tried to operate from an airfield while a carrier is being repaired? Could a Bell's guns be moved on landed batteries, like what happened to IRL, still have their effectiveness? Will we see some kind of Morgana equivalent of the sinking of the Blücher? So, it's a tools thing, isn't it? Right? Like, you can have a favorite hammer or a favorite screwdriver or whatever, but if you lend it to somebody else, you can't necessarily just raise your hand and expect it to return to you, right? That's how I see it.
Unless you're Thor.
Unless you're Thor, yes, and you have that magical returning screwdriver, or, whatever the story was.
Pretty sure it was a screwdriver.
So for the Bell's air group, there does appear to be a limit to which the air group can go where the Bell loses awareness of them. So if they were operating at a field, close by her dock, probably she'd still be directing them and aware of them. But if they were sent, halfway across the other world or attached to some other ship, then it's very likely that she'd lose that link.
Yeah, but that being said, that link does exist, and that's something that Augusto's very jealous of, if I remember correctly.
It's a bit longer than that, Kat. Actually, it seems to be quite a bit longer than that. But they haven't. No one's spent the time during the war to map out the exact distance. But yeah, it seems to be fairly distant.
Nice to know that Thor the Raider is in the game as well. No comment. Is the Bermuda Triangle a thing in this universe, or are we past geographic mystical phenomenon?
Yeah, no comment there, Dragoon.
Yeah, certainly some bells are more superstitious than others. Despite despite coming from, somewhere, wherever the bell dimension is. But that's certainly not something that we're interacting with right now, the Bermuda Triangle. Is there a research division / resistance movement giving us clues as the timeline progresses? Yes, the Bell Operations and Activities Task Force is your friend. In regards to Morganas, yeah, that's their area of expertise as well. And of course, that's the IMPF constituent body, right? That's the international sort of thing that we've got going on. Of course, every country will have their own sort of research going on as well, for better and or for worse. Players and captains, what is giving us naval authority to do the things we're doing, amassing a fleet of all these bells? The bells themselves, the bells' affinity with the captains. The various fleets work with what they have, and if what they have is somebody who can apparently work with these bells more closely on a strategic and personal and maybe not psychic level, that's what the council works with.
Yeah, so if you think about the League of Nations and then the INPF, that's the body of law, right? But the bells themselves have selected you. And even if their crews desired otherwise, that bell is coming to you. Now, you, in 1939, are definitely taking a stance where you are more internationally minded. That, of course, may not always be the case. And how that changes, or if that changes, the bell's sort of affinity to you is a question that, well, you'll find out the answer to.
And of course, different navies are going to be more or less receptive to the bell's requests for certain captaincy, for certain personnel. Does that affect y'all? Not really. But are there cases of certain bells winding up with personnel that they'd rather not have? Sure. Because again, they are at the end of the day in the service of whatever navy they spawn into, right? Again, for better or for worse. If by some miracle Japan joins the Allies in this timeline, does that mean China would join the Axis? That's not something that we can really know, unfortunately. That's another metagame consideration that's fairly down the road. I mean, we've seen certainly historically there is precedent for certain there's precedent for certain pro-Axis strains in the Allied colonies, for example. I know there was Subhas Chandra Bose in India who had his own idea of an independence movement, betting against the British. Could that happen in China? Who knows? That's a question for future jank. Can I ask questions about the metagame here? Yeah. Can't necessarily promise immediate answers, but feel free. Do not see the U.S. exactly ending up with Japan. China was historically aligned with Germany to a degree, much to the annoyance of Japan. Yeah, and again, who knows? There were attempts at détente right up until the critical moment. Let's give it it's taken over by another nation. Let's say Germany, because that was common, with the intention of renaming. How does this affect the physical look and the mental state of the bell? So this sort of question came up earlier in internal discussions, like, what if somebody captures Deutschland and renames her Franklin Delano Roosevelt? There's only so far that sort of change can affect a bell, right? That depends on just how it would be different if the bell were sunk and then later refloated, I would think. Franklin Deutschland Roosevelt. What is the INPF's mandate with regards to civilians and upholding international law? How do they deal with problems of authority and jurisdiction? How much practical leeway do bells have to do what they please and make the INPF legal team's life a complete hell? Case by case. Case by case, I would say. They, I think certainly international maritime law is a consideration. To the extent that that's respected during World War time.
So, I think just to expand on this one, a bit. Remember that events are overtaking anybody's ability to properly legislate. They've just taken the neutrality fleet, which they had rules for in the Spanish Civil War, and they've just hastily sort of reapplied that, which means that there are specific zones that have been loosely agreed to in which the fleet's authority is decisive. Now, they have yet to receive a challenge or a test to that authority, because the civilian traffic, freighters, and the like are all too happy to get protection from the Morganas. But when those tests come, the framework is very loose. It's certainly non-binding, and it's more or less cobbled together because the legislative organs of the League of Nations are not in the best health at this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, you're hammering out a, you're building a new weapon effectively on the battlefield, right? It's not going to be clean. Nevada has a line about shooting herself out of a cannon to expand the distance so that she can leave her ship. If she did, would she just hit an invisible wall and stop, or would she teleport back to her ship and just keep rolling on? So, if you hold your breath, eventually, your body's just going to involuntarily start you breathing again, right? You can't just suffocate yourself at will. That's how I choose to interpret. These things. Now, can bells find creative ways around that? I don't doubt it, but it's quite rare. And most bells are happy not to really bother with that. Wichita, Wigbert, Wichita, of course, is different. Her story is your friend if you want more about that. And it's certainly not the last time that we'll revisit this particular area of science. To the degree that science is the appropriate word. At some point during the beta, Italy and Germany had negative war scores. How could this be interpreted in-game? The Morganas were doing really well in the Baltic and the Mediterranean. What can I say?
I'll add to this. So originally, your actions could actually decrease the war scores of other nations. So you could intentionally fail missions, if you will, in spectacular ways that would cause damage to, sort of other nations' scores and whatnot. We took that away because the team, were exploiting that, and I think you just saw a relic from that. But no, you can't do negative war scores any longer.
Yeah, I was too busy doing paperwork since I was, leading the Italians single-handedly for a little bit there.
Yes, Dragoon. They've been referenced. There are other captains out there. There are no Morgana-led nations or zones in 1939.
Or do they simply suppress or antagonize coastal and oceanic areas? That sort of storytelling is, it's possible within the, I will say it's possible within the limited scope of the campaign blurbs. But, we're certainly not going to see a Morgana nation emerge in any time in the near future. If at all.
Two quick things, and then gang. At least I have to go. Jank, I don't know if you do as well.
I got all the time in the world.
Calcaras, for Spain and Turkey in the Axis, that is a dirty hack that we have made for the miners. Technically, they should be sort of like neutral nations, but if we did it that way, then those minor nations would need all the support that the neutrals have in terms of their own goals and so on and so forth. We didn't want to do that for things that are Kickstarter exclusive. Now, as we go along and we allow people to play Spain or play, the Netherlands as their core nation, then we'll expand those tables and we'll break them out properly. But for the time being, we just map them. That way they can inherit those goals and those missions and allow the players, the same experience as others. And then the other one was Cat. Is there a point where we engage other bells and other nation ships? Definitely, we have a high interest in doing things like fleet exercises, which are just fun, right? Where you can do a little PvP. But as to the other stuff, other nation ships or directly affect other nations, time will tell. Okay. You want to get Murder and play her story? Well, time will tell.
Morgana Storius.
Huh, where have I heard that before? Interesting. All right. Gang, I got to drop, but you guys have fun, and I'll catch up with you later, Jane.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Absolutely.
coming.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many there's only so many variations on a theme of murder, death, kill, right? That you can write with a Morgana story.
No, every chapter's in a different language. There you go.
You know, a different Morgana language.
Yeah, we're just teaching people to be multilingual.
Mm.
It's really a community project at that point.
Mm. You know, to the degree that the Morgana language is useful in the larger world.
I mean, hey, people in D&D learn how to speak like Abyssal, so.
Yeah, you know, I used to, you know, back in the day, I used to be able to read the, like, Circly Bionicle language, like, perfectly. You know, people will
That
pay
really does
attention.
not surprise me.
Long time ago. Can somebody elaborate on his fixation size? Does she actually have a sub-main body? I would say yeah. She's got options, certainly. She's sort of a double threat, you know, because you've seen her on the map. Of course, she's big enough to grapple a ship, and Achilles herself has attested to that, you know. Okay, Revise want to fight other bells canonically within the war within real bullets. Nubian versus Pola, coup de grace, you know. Oh, regular size sub. Nubian versus Pola, coup de grace. You know, I've had this because Orion helps track down Pola for Nubian to finish off, right? And I've had this wonderful idea in my head for, I want to see art of, you know, Nubian about to coup de grace Pola with Orion holding a sword to her throat, right? If somebody could draw that, I'd be over the moon.
That's how you get the stories you want. You bribe the devs. Easy.
Everybody has a price. Some bells have college educations like Henley. What do they actually remember? Oh, I'm actually glad you asked that. And the Henley story is, the Henley story does delve into that. And all I can say is, you know, they have a, it's down to the variable nature of Bell memories, right? You know, they're imbued with, you know, knowledge and memories of their namesakes and their origins, and the cultures that spawn them. In some cases, that's a very vivid memory of having attended this particular, college. You know, that has to do with her background. So it doesn't manifest in the same way. It manifests in very idiosyncratic ways. But yeah, Henley's an honorary. Henley's an honorary student of William and Mary. You know, actually having attended would be a difficult proposition.
Oh yeah, I have a similar question actually, if I can interject real quick.
Sure.
Playing through Imden's story, excuse me
Yes.
if I butchered that. She has a class of her own that comes onto the ship. I presume for adult students?
Yeah, sort of graduate class of students.
Okay, I was worried I was bringing actual children into a war zone, but you know, that's better.
No, yeah. That is a bridge too far for Emden, certainly.
That's good.
Let's see. How does Professor Lewis feel about getting letters from Belfast? Well, let me turn the question. Around on y'all. How would y'all feel about getting letters from Belfast or Henley or insert waifu here?
I mean, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a unique perspective that not everybody would have access to.
What do I need to pay for letters from Cesare?
Well, add a few more zeros to the Kickstarter tier and we can talk.
We'll see.
Pretty sure somebody's asked this before, but do Zeppelin's airships have bells? Conceivably. Certainly if a bell had an airship that she could deploy and interact with, she could communicate with in some form or fashion. We touched on this earlier. Again, not in a way that humans have really figured out how to interact with, if indeed that can be figured out. Tank treads on a ship, very, very nice. Land ship, I love that. I can't remember what it was. That one book series, or it was a book or an anime or something with cities on tank treads that went around the world.
Like London was its own city or something. Didn't they make a movie about that?
I have no idea. That's been in my ever-growing backlog for quite a while. Scharnhorst founded her own college after getting grade on 1. Look it up. I'd have to look up her story again. A bit of discontinuity between the Bells being able to talk in English and their text-based storyline dialogue, but speaking in their native tongue with their in-game voice lines. What gives lore-wise? I mean, presumably, if you watch Lord of the Rings again, right? Presumably they're not speaking English, right? But for the sake of the audience watching, we can understand the Fellowship talking among themselves. We can understand the hobbits and the men talking among themselves. It's sort of a gameplay story disconnect for the benefit of the player. Don't think it made it too far on the box office. That's a shame.
I remember earlier, and some of the earlier stories I've read, so this could easily be wrong because that was friggin' months ago at this point.
Go ahead.
It was, there was this unspoken rule that Bells had to essentially listen to what the captain said if they commanded them to do something, and they didn't do this often because it's, well, rude, but that it was a rule. Is that actually a thing, or am I just misremembering something from some other random game I've played?
Also, no, you're not wrong. Like, there's a general accepted wisdom that Bells will ultimately go along with what their captain decides. But as we'll find out in one story or another, Bells have a fairly expansive latitude in the carrying out of the captain's directives and desires.
We're operating on genie rules again. Okay, got it.
Essentially, yes. Ultimately they're on your side. In the case of certain Bells, they are also on their own side. Who knows? Speaking of Scharnhorst, is the reason she prevents herself with 4 turrets instead of 3 dealt in Chapter 2, Friendship or Romance? I'd have to pull that off. I don't recall off the top of my head.
It's been a while since I've played through the Romance, but I don't think it is.
Yeah. Still waiting for either subtitles and voice lines. I would love subtitles and voice lines so everybody could see the cool stuff that they say. Similar to the opening sequence where Recruit was waiting for her to order attack. Oh yeah. There's a I prefer to interpret that as the Bell chooses the captain, but the captain has to reach out and take her hand, figuratively.
Sometimes literally.
Yeah. If we're gonna get into the heavily M-rated territory of hand-holding.
I mean, yeah, true. That is very M-rated.
This is where the stream gets mature, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry if you're not above the age of consent, whatever your country is, get out now. I'll have you banned. I know the mods.
Cover your ears, kids. Cover them now. Are there any in-game reasons for the costumes? Like, did Recruit just really like Pinocchio or Halloween? So this is an interesting thing. Like, so when we're coming up with the costumes, we try to come up with stuff that would that wouldn't be out of character for the bell in question. That would have some kind of in-universe sort of explanation. You know, you're not going to see Belle like dressed up as a Gundam or whatever, right? But in terms of Recruit as Pinocchio, for example, we'd be going off older sort of classical depictions of Pinocchio, rather than any of the newer interpretations thereof. So, you know, now is this of course malleable? Sure. You know, like I'm thinking of that one Tree of Life skin that Fuso has. But in general, we do try to keep to you know, that general nature theme, as in the one I just mentioned, or something that's inspired by the era or their history that they would conceivably put on. You know, whether on their own initiative or on the captain's, and in that latter case, you know, grudgingly or not. How many Morganas are voiced by devs? Let me see. So I'm Sin, of course. Treason's Yami. Those are the only two that I know off the top of my head. I have the document somewhere around here. I think it's just those two. Yeah, for now. You know. And as to the question of husbandos and you know, who can say where the road goes? Not sure if you're allowed to answer that. How can bells interact with each other if they can't go more than a few meters from their ships? How do a large group of bells interact? So, you know, it's sort of a, you know, and I have, you know, limited experience with Warhammer, but basically, you know, if you get a whole bunch of these beings together, like, you know, there's certain things that they can do better than if they're apart, you know. And that's about the only way that I can conceive of bells as being like orcs. But I personally, yeah, Sarcastic Cat, that's not a bad way of going about it. I personally view the Bell interactions from the interviews and whatnot as, you know, think of it as like an omake, you know, as opposed to a proper anime series. It exists in sort of a semi-canonical space. For Differjank, what state was that Eritrea and Bell, construction-wise, before they popped into existence? I don't recall off the top of my head. It's been a minute since I looked at Espero's story. I will say that there are, you know, it's not out of the realm of possibility for a Bell to awake in certain stages of construction or disrepair. And that's all I'm.
The Russian Bell you can't pronounce, apparently. I think her story deals with that as well.
Parishkaya Komuna?
Yeah. With one of her sister ships.
PK, however you pronounce it. Treason's Yam, what about the Morgana that share similar likes with different distortions? Not sure what Incinda you're getting at there. Similar lines. I don't know. Treason's the only one she's voiced that I know of in any event. In Game World, how would that work? Or maybe that few meters restriction don't apply when I'm bored of other bells. Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to believe that there's a certain sort of if there's a certain like overlap of the bells, and of course, you know, bells can, you know, some bells can stretch these things more than others. But if there's a certain overlap of that effective bell radius, I think they can share among one another to a degree. Is a bell manifesting something other than themselves and their clothes rare/hard like San Giorgio's horse or Bolzano's bike? You know, Different rigging, different bell, different possessions, different bell. You know, I know some bells. You know, Amerigo Vespucci, for example, she comes in with her, you know, with her little chameleon friend Soderini. You know, it depends on the bell, but it's not out of the ordinary. Or a full horse kappa. Imagine that. Imagine that, sarcastic cat. Speaking of cats, I don't know if you heard that. Ending can stretch it to the near big ring and a. Now I'm really going into speculation. In our world, Vespucci survived into the present day. What would that look like in the Victory Bells verse? I mean, you know, bells that we know of don't age, you know? I mean, there are a fair few bells that survived into the present day, you know? Belfast is a museum ship nowadays. Aurora's a museum ship. USS Texas, of course, she's one of 8 battleships that survived to this day that's fought in both world wars. So yeah, you know, they would still be around talking to us. I don't know of any circumstance under which bells would disappear or demanifest.
I'm glad to assume I'm glad to see Calc assumes are going to win.
Yeah, you know, like I'm seeing surprisingly little speculation on world ruled by the Morganas. Always
nice to see.
My cat's chiming in here. She's got some stake in it. Who knows what it is? I don't speak cat. Granny bells. Some bells manifest as older than others. In Cinda.
I remember in Kavor's story, there's specifically an organization that is over, I guess, to put it simply, Bell's rights, and if they exist or not.
Mm-hmm.
Will they be more present in the future, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, bells have a, and again, you know, this varies from bell to bell, but there's a lot of question. I can, you know, as an American who's done some thinking about this from my end of things, I've, you know, there is some hot debate in the American camp, you know, over whether Bell should vote, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the assumption that I'm going with right now is no, they can't, because of some bizarre technicality whereby no American bell or very few American bells are of voting age. You know, I mean, yeah, you know, a lot of the destroyers, a lot of the cruisers are technically like single digit or you know, double digit ages and not necessarily a voting age. That's the sort of weird technicality that isn't uncommon in our history that I can absolutely see popping up here. And as the war progresses, you know, I'm sure you will see some agitation from certain bells over whether they should have more of a stake in their country's democratic process,
or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, you know, in the case of certain Axis friends. Then you can be the one seeking sin on people. Again, you know, Morgana captains, who knows? Will someone offer a pair of pants to Suffering one day? I mean, does she want them? Can't wait for the he can go to war but can't vote coming 2 decades early with regards to bells. Yeah. I can think of a couple American bells with some pretty powerful opinions on that. Boise. If there's one day bell that is very, very lascivious, what would be the difference between that bell and sin? Well, I mean, you know, for Sin, her whole bearing is essentially a weapon. You know, you're a sailor who's on a bell ship, or even worse, a non-bell ship who's been at sea for days and days, dealing with constant Morgana onslaught, and then along comes Sin lounging on her deck, inviting you to come and you know, relax and enjoy. You might take that offer, and then of course, you know, whatever she wants to do with you, she can. Corky is correct. Sin is a tease, and of course, that's a means to an end.
We did miss a question from Urza a little bit up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry about that. What would happen to a Belle if something were to happen to her captain, i.e. the player character? Would damsel in distress plot be effective against them? Are we the Belle's weakness? So for various engine considerations, we haven't really delved into Belle and Captain being separated. Could it conceivably happen? Yeah. But in general, that's not something that we've really explored. Like, I mean, certainly, it wouldn't incapacitate the Belle. But I can't think of a Belle that would leave her captain high and dry, right? She'd want to...
like the 77, 76 I've done? Nah, I can't think of any. I can think of one, actually. Okay, never mind.
Which one?
Sarkoof. I'm pretty sure Sarkoof would leave you high and dry at some point.
No, you're too useful to her. Or at least too interesting. The Bells are strong, yes, but that doesn't make them effective to their full potential on their own. Yeah, I mean, rhetorical question. They can do things one at a time, right? Like, if a Belle's exerting full control over her navigation, obviously that's a demand on her attention, and she can't effectively conduct fire control at the same time, right? That's why they still need a crew. They're very, very powerful, but there's a limit to their sort of omnipresence aboard their own ship. In terms of the how they can exert that influence. Some Bells are doing some unsavory things too, TBF, no comment. Bells being not a tease, confirmed. It varies. Is there a reason why sabotage and sedition tend to show up together in the same fleet? Aren't they? Let me see. I'm pretty sure that's just down to hull type. Because again, it's sabotage and sedition are the only battle cruiser Morganas, and of course the Morgana generation does take hull type into account. So nature of the beast, really. Sarkoof won't get rid of you. She needs your signature, to the extent that she can't forge it. Could there be an evil Belle? Like if Queen Anne's Revenge manifested, could she just be selfish and use the war for her own ends? So I was reading about this the other day. Like, so Queen Anne's Revenge wasn't really meant to be like, pirate ships in general weren't that distinctive. We only know that Queen Anne's Revenge is Queen Anne's Revenge, archaeologically speaking, because of circumstantial evidence surrounding the where we found the wreck and the condition that we found it in. So if indeed she manifested, she'd certainly be one of the more low-key Bells. In terms of evil Bells, there are a couple of Bells that I personally am comfortable describing as evil. And could she just be selfish and use the war for her own ends within the sort of framework of the Captain Bell relationship? Absolutely. Feel Morgana Captain will either be heavily indoctrinated or hypnotized into thinking of the Morgana as Bells. In the same way that Morganas consider Bells to be evil and themselves to be, carrying out their own heroic goals. Nobody thinks of themselves as evil. Played through Fubuki's story. Yep, that's your friend. If a Bell needs a captain, but you're the only one existing, how can they all operate at their full potential? Yeah, I mean, again, I refer you to the earlier question about, how many captains are there in the Victory Bells world, and who is the player as opposed to the rest of them. It's essentially the same world that everybody gets to participate in to a certain degree.
I do note that some stories seem to assume you're in command of a larger fleet with multiple Bells, and some stories just seem to assume you have one Bell under your control and that's it.
Yeah, and that and that depends on. I think that depends on the scope of the story, because some stories exclusively deal with that bell, and some stories, because we mention other bells in certain stories. Certainly,
Nelson's is the one I'm thinking of.
yeah, Nelson's, or I know Lamotte Piquet has that book club going on. It comes down to the scope of the story, I think. Some stories, and that in turn depends on the writer. Ultimately, some stories will just have Captain and Bell interacting. Some stories will have a larger cast of NPCs. We get different snapshots into into those aspects of the Bellverse, but it's just that, a snapshot.
Yeah.
Congo's interview involving her jumping from the top of her mast onto her deck. Do bells suffer from fall damage? Not in the same way that we do. I would think. We have as humans the absolute certainty that if we step off a 10-story building, it's going to ruin our day. Bells, in addition to that inherent self-preservation instinct, of course, could they be distracted and conceivably trip? Sure. Would that put them out of commission? I would say no. Can think of anyone who would think of Morgana's as evil aside from treason. Each story presents a different captain. It really depends on how much you want to project yourself. Yeah, that's not an unsafe assumption. Sarcastic captain of the bells, separate from captain of the ship. Yeah, that's also not an unsafe interpretation. Do I wonder if I'm broken? Says the girl who hears voices. Anyway, in principle, each of us is a captain of the ship. They have the authority to challenge us when they say we've received orders from our captain, but I've never known that to happen during combat. Yeah, nor can I think of a scenario where that would happen. Outside of combat, things are more formal. It's expected that more decisions will be made by the human crew. Yeah, and of course, we try to be accommodating. Yeah, and of course, there's the bell veto. But that's more of a legal thing than anything. Could you remind us?
Not, but
Could you remind us? Yeah, you're responding to. Could you remind us why Malabrese is best girl, please? That's a funny way to spell for done.
I think you've just started a fight. You're not going to win. Damn.
I'm in it for the love of the game.
Fair enough. I don't speak French, so it doesn't bother me that her accent.
Oh, no right.
Yeah.
Are the bells
being monolingual?
Are the bells rigging as they are presented in their in-game art? So, Calcaros, expand on that for me. Do you mean that the bells appear with that rigging canonically in the story? Because that's the way that I choose to believe that's the way that the devs choose to treat it, I think, right? If they appear with rigging, that's the rigging that they appear with canonically. Can they work the same? Yeah, okay, yeah. Can they work the same way as regular cannons do? Yeah, they can shoot with their rigging. They appear with their rigging. As you'll see in Exeter's friendship, I believe, they can also dismiss it or summon it as they please. Because otherwise Scharnhorst wouldn't be able to walk through a doorway. So there's certainly some freedom to operate there. When lewd QnA, also bonk bonk bonk. Yeah, that is the proper response. Bonk bonk bonk.
I think that's referring to the actual rifles on the ship in the story, at least.
Oh, you mean like a bell snapping her fingers and firing her main gun?
Yeah, or in Malabreza's story specifically, I think she physically rotates the turrets themselves and conks some guy on the head.
Yeah, that can happen.
I've read it.
We were actually discussing Saguenay just the other day, I think, and yeah, that pops up in her story too.
Oh yeah, it did. That was a good story. I like that one.
Yeah, I like her a lot. All right. What else do we got? We gone through just about everybody's speculation, everybody's questions.
So you still got some people typing. See what they have.
Does that mean a ship like Scharnhorst would have 21 main guns? I mean, she's got whatever hardware that she's got in our timeline.
I know. Speaking of personal weaponry, I believe in Exeter's, she you try to like wield her sword at some point, and it's not easy.
Well, because she's got the remarkably thin sword. I'll give you an example. In Gnevny's story, it's possible for her to lend out her little mine thrower to somebody else to use. Can she recall it at any time? Is it very, very conditional? Absolutely. But there's no reason that Captain couldn't just be handed a sword by Exeter and use it.
True, and you do duel Vespucci many times.
Oh yeah, and she's one of the greatest. She's the greatest sword duelist in the fleet, I should say. Although she has competition certainly from Exeter and Hiryu. Those I would say are the top three. What happens when the Belle is outfitted with equipment her ship was not built to handle? Like 8-inch guns in the bigger destroyers or radar and literally anything. And I mean, that's governed by design weight. If she can take it, she can take it. If she can't, she can't. And there certainly would be no conceivable advantage to It's effectively, if you try and put the Schwere Gustav on Saguenay or whatever, that's something that she has to. That she might be able to not sink and do, but it's like imagine marching into battle with like 100-pound weights in your arms and legs. You wouldn't do that. You just wouldn't. More asking like what actually happens to the boat, like the Belle's rigging. Oh, okay. Well, the Belle's rigging is the Belle's rigging, and the boat is the boat, right? Two different things. She herself, like Vespucci herself or Saguenay herself or whatever, couldn't manifest an enormous railway gun on her back. Who is number one sword fight? Corky, that's for now that's Vespucci. The Belle's rigging fire the same shells as their main guns, scaled down to their rigging size.
Do they do the same damage though? Same amount of damage?
That's a physics question, and I studied English, so that's a question for a more mechanically minded person.
I studied environmental science, so I'm entirely useless in that.
Well, there you go. Crossover when contact collection crossover would be very interesting to see a Nagato interaction. I mean, fan fiction is a great and terrible beauty. We know that Richelieu's art is finished. Can we say the same for Bismarck? No comment. The heavy hitters are certainly coming, but
we'll see.
We're playing our cards. Yeah, we're playing our cards close to our chest. Even if it scaled 30.5 centimeters to 3.05 centimeters, it would be okay. So similar force in a smaller package. Yeah, that would hurt. Show us Richelieu's art, please. I'd have to go to the team about that.
At least give us the feed,
Well, I'm afraid, I I think it was Incinda who saw those special feat from that contest, and yeah, I think in terms of if we're making a tier list of feat, I don't think Richelieu's would rank quite as high on Incinda's list. Who knows? You might be really into red.
I'm
But
just
who can
glad I'm
say?
not the feet person anymore, to be honest.
It spreads. It spreads. How much would we need to bribe you? If you have to ask, you can't afford it.
True.
Do other bells find it weird that subs are always swimming? I don't think necessarily weird.
Can't remember what sub. One of them just sticks their head out through the side while they're going along.
I think you're thinking of Kumano, right?
I know she does that, but I think a sub does it as well. One of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think
They all blur together after some point of time.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people are avid bikers. Some people spend a lot of their time swimming, running, whatnot.
Yeah, some people stick their head through walls.
Yeah, same basic principle.
Yeah.
It's a different way of some people can do some things, some can do others, as Mr. Rogers said. Again, we return to that dynamic of carriers being able to communicate with and perceive, what their planes do.
True.
Now I'm really curious as what happens when I outfit a bell. If you equip more than one more gun than a ship had historically, does it have its original gun number for all intents and purposes, i.e. the ship looks the same and the rigging is unchanged? Until bells do damage to something, at that point they hit with the force of their outfitted total. Again, the bell is the bell and the ship is the ship, and the rigging isn't necessarily affected one or the other. If a sub swims, let's say she does laps around her ships, they should be swimming like real fast. So, I mean, within reason, of course, conceivably, I mean, look at Exeter, right? She has the capacity to be fast enough to catch bullets, right? A bell is conceivably limited only by her, specs, right? So, Mori, for example, would have 50,000 shaft horsepower that she can devote to whatever she likes. Do they exercise the full extent of that power? Some do, some don't. And can they push the limits? Again, some do, some don't. Some can, some can't. In theory, it's possible. Care to share some tips on the April Fool's chibi? Yeah, that has been a hot minute. We do have the list of, because half of the components of that April Fool's chibi have been guessed, and I do have a list of that. I'll toss that in the chat afterward. Her name is Pillage, and she's now a Morgana. Oh, good idea. If you change equipment on a bell, does that get reflected on the rigging? Yeah, I mean, again, the bell is the bell, the ship is the ship. Hans Ludemann can mechanic. That strikes me as something they should tinker with.
Ouch. Wow.
Killed 3 Hans Ludemann with bugs. Just remember.
I mean, who haven't you killed? So there's that too.
Hmm. Very early on, there's a menu dedicated to placing guns and equipment topside, similar to, like with the, with like the ship itself, and then you just drag the equipment in place. No word on that. That's not my department. I remember a Morgana called Disillusionment being in Jean's story. Will we see her in the future? Who can say? Oh, Delusion. Yeah, you're probably thinking of Delusion. Right.
I think she was in the story.
Yep.
That one was one I did
All right.
last year as well.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up on just about all the time that I have. If anybody has, anybody has 2 or 3 more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Wow, that's a first.
I think I'm broken questions for now. Okay. Anybody else? Any other bells with powers other than the regular bell magic like Atlantis? Yes.
Some even forget they have powers.
All right, and yeah, LCA. We try to balance it out among nations. In terms of skins, in terms of event bells, something. In terms of event bells, it's more week by week, so we rotate. All right, yeah. More bell voices. Yep, that's coming. All right. Well, Wigbert, thank you for putting this all together. Y'all, thank you for your questions. Ellen Kalkaras, thank you for asking. We're all doing very well, and we are absolutely trending better, given current events.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Dink. I'm glad.
Hey, absolutely. Hey, I'm always happy to.
I'm definitely willing to do more of these in the future, as usual. More of the I guess, specific Q&As compared to the more general ones we typically do.
Cool.
So if anyone has any questions or recommendations for what kind of Q&As they'd like to see in the future, just put them here, message them to me. I don't really care, one way or the other. Yeah, we'll do the hand-holding Q&A next. That'll be the next one.
Yep.
You have to send me a copy of your birth certificate so I can make sure you're of age, and we'll be.
Yeah, we do card for that. That's very important.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. No further questions, and y'all have a wonderful day. We will do this again.
Indeed.
All right. Y'all take care.